Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where frost creeps through cracks in wooden walls, and breath turns to ghostly vapor before your eyes. You're not scrolling your phone anymore. You're standing barefoot on a dirt floor, in a medieval hut that smells faintly of smoke, cabbage, and the wool tunic you've worn for 6 straight weeks. It's the dead of winter, and outside, the wind has claws. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're tuning in from, and what time it is right now. I'm curious to see where in the world we're sharing this midnight frost together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before sunrise, not because you want to, but because the cold doesn't let you sleep for long. The air bites. It's a kind of cold that feels alive, a mischievous creature crawling under your blanket of straw and wool, whispering, "Good morning." Peasant. Your breath makes small ghosts that hover in the dark before vanishing into the rafters, where last summer's herbs hang brittle and forgotten. Your fingers ache before you move them. The first challenge of every winter morning isn't courage or hunger. It's convincing your body to leave the tiny pocket of warmth you've trapped under the blanket. The thatch roof above you sighs with frost, and somewhere outside, a rooster, clearly insane, tries to crow through the cold. You reach for your boots. They're stiff, crusted with yesterday's mud, and probably still damp. Slipping into them feels like plunging your feet into buckets of ice water. The hut is no palace. It's one room, one hearth, and one door that lets in every whisper of wind. But this little space, patched with wattle and daub, is your universe. Historians still argue whether most peasant homes in the Middle Ages had chimneys at all. Many didn't. The smoke from the fire simply filled the room, curling toward a hole in the roof, or seeping through the thatch. You cough a little as you stir the coals, eyes watering, and think, if the cold doesn't kill you, maybe the smoke will. You nudge the embers awake with a stick, then blow gently, coaxing them to life. There's an art to it, passed down like gossip. Too much air, and the ashes scatter. Too little, and the fire soaks. Finally, it catches. The glow spreads like gossip across the wood. You feel that tiny flicker of victory. Every peasant knows you've brought back the light. The fire doesn't just heat you, it centers you. It's the heartbeat of the hut. Without it, you can't cook, you can't dry your clothes, you can't keep the children alive. You watch sparks twist upward and think of how medieval people saw fire as both gift and threat, a wild spirit tamed by prayer and practice. There's even a quirky bit of folklore from northern France claiming that if you let your fire go out on Christmas Eve, you'd invite wolves into your dreams. And frankly, given the draft in this place, you believe it. As the room brightens, you see your family stirring. Everyone sleeps close, bundled together for warmth. It's not romantic, it's survival. You shuffle quietly, trying not to wake the baby. The chickens rustle in their corner, a reminder that livestock often shared space with people. Their body heat helped, and their company wasn't the worst. Unless, of course, they decided to make their opinions known at 3 a.m. outside. Dawn paints the frost in pale pink. You push open the door, and the cold rushes in like an uninvited guest. The world is white, silent, and sharp-edged. The thatch glitters like it's been dusted with sugar, and every breath you take feels like chewing glass. You step outside anyway, because you have to. There's wood to gather, water to break from ice, and work that doesn't wait for warmth. The well is a frozen monument to inconvenience. You use a stick to chip away the ice, praying the rope hasn't frozen stiff. Your hands are already numb. Gloves are a luxury, so you blow on your fingers and think of the saints for warmth. And here's a mainstream historical fact. Most medieval peasants didn't just rely on wood for heat. They relied on dung. Cow dung, horse dung, sometimes even human waste, mixed with straw and dried into what they called fuel cakes. You wrinkle your nose as you imagine stacking them near your hearth. But desperate times make strange perfumes. The cold defines the rhythm of your day. Every choice revolves around it: what to wear, what to eat, when to sleep. You learn to move constantly, because stillness is the enemy. Your breath crystallizes as you haul water inside, feeling that dull ache deep in your joints, the kind that whispers of frostbite if you linger too long. By midday, the world hasn't warmed much. The sun is a pale coin behind thin clouds. You pause at the doorway and notice smoke from other huts curling lazily into the sky. The village is alive, each home its own small battle against the season. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rings, a sound as steady as hope. You go about your chores, feeding the animals, scraping ice off tools, checking the thatch for leaks. You mutter curses at the wind, the kind that sound almost like prayers. There's humor in it too. You joke with yourself, because laughter, however thin, feels like warmth. Maybe next winter, you say, "I'll migrate south like the geese. They seem to have it figured out." When you return to the hearth, your fingers tingle painfully as the blood returns. You hold them close to the flames, grateful. Firelight dances on the walls, flickering over the faces of your family. For a moment, the world feels safe, even cozy. But there's always that edge of uncertainty. What if the woodpile runs low? What if sickness comes? What if the Lord's tax collector decides this is a good day to visit? Winter doesn't just freeze your toes. It freezes time itself, stretching the days into long, grey echoes of one another. And yet, life continues. You eat when you can, laugh when you're able, and sleep when exhaustion wins. Sometimes, you huddle under your cloak and tell stories, the kind that make you forget how thin the walls are. One tale says that if you see your reflection in the ice and it smiles back, spring is coming early. Another warns that frost fairies pinch your toes at night if you complain too much about the cold. You test that theory by grumbling extra loud. No fairies appear. Maybe they're unionized. As darkness falls again, you prepare the hut for another long night. You rake the fire into a glowing bed, tuck the children under blankets, and listen to the soft creak of the wind outside. The same routine, the same fragile balance between warmth and hunger, between survival and surrender. Historians still argue whether the so-called Little Ice Age hit hardest in your century or the next, but standing here, wrapped in layers of patched wool, you don't need climate data to tell you the truth. The cold is real, and it's merciless. You lie down, muscles sore, listening to the crackle of the hearth. The smell of smoke and straw fills your nose. You close your eyes, knowing that in the morning, you'll do it all again, because that's what peasants did. They endured. They adapted. They kept the fire alive, even when the world seemed determined to snuff it out. And as sleep begins to pull you under, you feel that quiet pride that comes from survival itself. The same pride that echoes through every frost-bitten dawn. You wake before the rooster this time, half wrapped in your blanket of coarse wool and straw, the air so cold that each exhale turns into a drifting ribbon of fog. Your joints creak like frozen hinges. The hearth is dim, just faint orange embers clinging to life, and your first thought is, what on earth are you going to wear? It's not as if you have a wardrobe. Fashion, for you, means the difference between shivering and surviving. You glance at the heap of clothes near the wall. Tunics, hose, a patched cloak, all more shades of mud than color. But there's art in the layers. You pull on a long shirt of coarse linen, itchy but essential. Over that, a tunic thickened with dirt and time. You wrap a length of old wool around your neck, and your boots, still stiff, go on last. The wool smells faintly of sheep, which makes sense because it used to be one. You tug the fabric tighter and grin at the thought, somewhere out there, a sheep might be walking around warmer than you. It's not jealousy exactly, more like admiration. You rummage for your hood, made from scraps of cloth sewn together with thread so uneven it looks like drunken handwriting. It doesn't matter. In the medieval world, warmth was a form of beauty. And this morning, beauty looks like a bundle of rags tied together by necessity. A quick fact to keep your spirits up. Medieval wool was a technological marvel for its time. Peasants spun and wove it themselves, thick and oily with lanolin, the natural grease that helped repel water. That lanolin smell clings to your clothes, and honestly, it's part of you now, a mix of smoke, sweat, and sheep, the perfume of survival. You step outside into the crisp air, and the cold bites right through the layers. Your breath curls away like steam from a boiling pot. Around you, the village stirs. Figures wrapped in cloaks, heads down against the wind. The sound of wood chopping rings out. Someone laughs sharply at nothing. There's comfort in knowing everyone else is just as cold. But peasants weren't helpless against winter's teeth. You adjust the rope that keeps your cloak tight, knowing how precious this piece of fabric is. Cloaks doubled as blankets, bedrolls, and sometimes even makeshift sacks when you needed to haul firewood. You'd trade nearly anything for good wool, except maybe your shoes. Footwear is where things get interesting. The average peasant didn't own multiple pairs. You've got one, and they're little more than stitched leather wrapped around foot, shaped hope. To stay warm, you stuff them with straw. It's not elegant, but it works. The straw traps heat and cushions your steps. When it starts to smell like a neglected barn, you just replace it. Voile, ancient foot insulation. There's an old superstition whispered among villagers that if you tuck a sprig of rosemary inside your left boot, you'll walk safely through winter. You don't know if it's true, but your neighbor swears it kept the frostbite away last year. You try it once, mostly because it smells better than your boots. Historians still argue whether peasants truly believed these charms worked, or if they just enjoyed having something to believe in when the cold grew cruel. But when your fingers go numb and your nose turns red, a little faith, herbal or otherwise, can't hurt. You pull your hood down tighter and head toward the barn. The animals are restless, huffing clouds into the air. They're warmer than you, their bodies steaming in the chill. You envy the cows for their fur and their apparent lack of concern for taxes. Feeding them is quick work, though your fingers ache from handling frozen buckets. You notice the frost-forming delicate lace on the wood beams, beauty you barely have time to admire. Every breath, every movement, every chore is about keeping circulation going. You think about your clothes again, how everything has a purpose. Even the straw mattress you sleep on can double as kindling if times get desperate. Peasants recycled everything, down to the last thread. When a tunic finally tore beyond repair, the fabric became patches for another, and then rags for cleaning, and eventually, stuffing for shoes. Nothing was wasted, not even the shreds of yesterday. And sometimes, fashion took an unexpectedly communal turn. You recall how your mother and sisters spent entire evenings carding and spinning wool by firelight, their fingers flying over the spindle. The rhythm of it was hypnotic. Talk, laughter, a little gossip about who might marry whom. Those spinning nights warmed more than just the room. There's even a fringe tidbit historians have debated for years. Some records mention peasants using animal intestines as waterproof linings for cloaks. You picture yourself walking around in a coat of guts and decide it's probably one of those medieval necessity is the mother of bad ideas moments. Still, if it worked, who are you to judge? By midday, you're sweating despite the cold. The layers trap warmth well enough that you start unwrapping like a human onion. The irony doesn't escape you. Half the year you freeze. The other half you roast inside your own clothes. Medieval fashion didn't do. Breathable fabrics. You catch your reflection in a frozen puddle. It's not much. A blurry outline of a bundled figure with wind, chapped cheeks and tired eyes. You smile faintly, amused by your own scrappiness. There's dignity in this, a quiet pride in making the most of what you have. Later, back inside, the fire crackles and spits. You hang your cloak near the warmth to dry. It's stiff with frost around the hem. The room fills with the earthy scent of wool, smoke, and damp straw, which somehow feels homey now. You sit close to the hearth, rubbing your hands, and your mind wanders. Somewhere in the castle up the hill, the lord's family is likely wrapped in imported furs, ermine sable, maybe even fox. Their beds are lined with linen sheets, their fires fed with endless wood. You can almost hear the sound of laughter echoing from stone walls. And yet, part of you feels oddly lucky. The Lord's Hall may be grand, but it's drafty too. Stone holds cold like a grudge. You picture him sneezing into his velvet sleeves, surrounded by servants fanning the smoke away from his face. You chuckle under your breath, one of your 3 daily jokes, because even medieval winters need humor. You tug the blanket tighter and think about the weight of layers. Not just fabric, but time. Each stitch, each patch, each thread carries the story of survival. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. Your clothes are your armor against a world that doesn't care if you shiver. Outside, the sky deepens toward twilight. The cold sharpens again. You check the door's latch, then your sleeves, then your boots. Ritual movements that mark the rhythm of your life. You listen to the wind whistling through the cracks and imagine it as an old friend, one that likes to complain louder than you do. Before sleep, you do one last thing. You tuck your hands under your armpits and hum quietly to yourself. It's a small trick learned from your grandfather. He claimed humming warmed the blood. You don't know if that's science or wishful thinking, but it works just enough. Somewhere between the last hum and the first dream, you think about how warmth isn't just temperature. It's effort, it's family, it's faith stitched into wool and wrapped around your shoulders. The night grows colder outside, but in your layered cocoon of rags and stories, you drift toward sleep, feeling almost royal in your patchwork crown. You wake to a thin, acrid scent, smoke that never truly left the air, weaving its way through your lungs like a stubborn ghost. The hearth beside you glows faintly, a lazy orange eye watching over the room. You roll over and poke at the ashes with a stick, muttering something halfway between a prayer and a curse. Keeping the fire alive is less about skill and more about constant vigilance. The moment you get complacent, it dies, and when that happens, the night stops pretending to be survivable. The fire is the fragile heart of your home. Every peasant knows this truth. When it fades, so does everything else. You look around the dim hut. The sleeping forms, the cracked walls, the hanging herbs gone brittle with frost. And think, without the fire, this place is just a box of cold memories. The embers need feeding. You gather what's left of last night's kindlings, thin twigs, bark, and a few precious chunks of real wood. You blow softly. Sparks leap up, momentary stars, before fading again. One catches, and you grin like someone who's just cheated death. Wood is life, but it's also scarcity. You remember how last week the woodcutter's cart tipped in the snow, spilling his winter stock into the mud. Half the village helped him recover what they could, not from charity, but because everyone's warmth depends on everyone else's luck. There's a saying whispered by the old women who sit closest to the fire: a man without wood in winter is already halfway buried. You chuckle at that, mostly because it feels true. Historians still argue whether peasants were allowed to gather fallen branches freely from the Lord's forest, or if they risked punishment for it. Either way, you know how it really works. Rules bend when fingers freeze. You've wandered those woods at night, listening for the snap of a branch underfoot and praying it's not a guard's boot. The thrill of sneaking firewood feels oddly like rebellion and slightly like theft. But as you tell yourself each time, cold is the greater crime. When you return to your hut, your prize bundle tucked under your arm, the smell of smoke greets you again. It seeps into your clothes, your hair, even your skin. You used to mind it. Now it's just part of who you are. If anyone could bottle the scent of medieval peasant, it would be equal parts oak smoke, sweat, and survival. The fire catches properly now, snapping and popping, each sound a promise. You lean close, soaking in the warmth, until your cheeks sting. The room brightens, shadows retreating to the corners. In that glow, you almost forget the cold outside. But of course, the fire comes with a price. The hut fills with smoke, thick and lazy, curling like a living creature. Without a chimney, it slithers up to the thatch and lingers there, waiting for any crack to escape. Your eyes sting. You cough and blink, muttering. At least it's warm enough to complain. It's a common experience. Historians note that most peasants' homes were perpetually smoky. The air could be so dense that visitors joked about drinking the atmosphere rather than breathing it. There's even a quirky account from a 14th century traveller who wrote that entering a peasant's home was like stepping into a cloud that wept tears of bacon grease and sorrow. You imagine him dramatically fanning his face, and you laugh, because if he spent one winter here, he wouldn't be so poetic. You adjust the fire again, balancing a few smaller sticks around the main log. It's like tending a cranky pet. It rewards patience, but punishes carelessness. You remember the stories your grandmother told about the hearth spirit, a small, invisible guardian who lived inside the flames. If you fed it too much, it would get greedy and burn the house down. Too little, and it would sulk and let the cold in. So you whisper a quick good morning to the fire, spirit, half serious, half habit. The superstition comforts you. Fire isn't just heat, it's company. By midday, the smoke has settled into a lazy rhythm. It swirls gently near the ceiling, catching sunlight in soft ribbons. The room glows gold, almost holy, like the inside of a cathedral built by necessity instead of faith. You stretch your hands toward the warmth and feel your skin crack slightly from dryness. It's not glamorous, but you've grown to love this dance. The constant tending, the ritual of adding wood, the sigh of flame against bark. Still, fuel is always scarce. You think of other tricks peasants used to stretch it. Dried peat from marshes, for instance. Dark, earthy, and slow, burning. Or those infamous dung cakes again, stacked neatly near the hearth. You tried burning them once. The smell made your eyes water, but the heat lasted longer than wood. You can almost hear the distant echo of someone saying, "Don't knock it till you've tried it." You decide to make a small pot of pottage. Vegetables, barley, and whatever scraps survived the week. You suspend it above the fire, the steam blending with smoke in a fragrant haze. The bubbling sound is a lullaby, soft and steady. It's strange how something so simple feels like victory. Between stirring, you step outside. The world is a winter painting. Fields frozen stiff, trees gloved in ice. The wind slices your cheeks. You turn back quickly, clutching your cloak tighter, and thank the heavens for your humble hearth. Inside, you settle onto your stool, squinting at the flames. They move like dancers, all rhythm and chaos. The orange light painting the room with flickers of life. You think of the grand feasts in the manor hall. Roaring fires, spits turning fattened geese, music echoing through stone corridors. You shake your head. Let them have their spectacle. You've got your humble flame, and it's enough. You eat your pottage slowly, savoring the heat more than the flavor. The spoon feels warm against your lips, the broth a small mercy. Around you, the air hums quietly. The fire crackles, the wind moans against the walls. A chicken mutters to itself in sleep. You realize how much this little fire shapes your day. It's the clock, the calendar, the comfort. When it's high and bright, the world feels possible. When it fades, time collapses into a kind of suspended waiting. Every ember is a heartbeat you can't afford to lose. Later, when the others gather around the hearth, you feel the shift. The space changes. Faces glow in the light, shadows dancing behind them. Someone tells a story about a farmer who tried to dry his socks too close to the flames and ended up setting his foot on fire. Everyone laughs, and the warmth grows thicker. It's strange how laughter burns, almost as bright as wood. As the night deepens, you feed the fire one last time, careful not to waste. You watch the flames curl and twist, hypnotic. The air smells of smoke and stew, and the faint sweetness of charred wood. Historians still argue whether peasants truly understood how much smoke harmed their lungs, or if they simply accepted it as the cost of staying alive. You don't know the science, but you do know this: when the wind howls outside and frost spiders across the window, that smoky air feels like the breath of mercy itself. You lie down near the hearth, wrapping your blanket close. The warmth seeps into your bones, heavy and slow. You think of how fragile it all is. One missed spark, one damp log, and the night could claim you. Yet somehow every morning, you wake to embers still alive. That's the miracle, isn't it? Not grand castles or battles or saints. Just the stubborn flame that refuses to die. Your eyes grow heavy. The last thing you see is the fire shrinking into soft coals, pulsing faintly in the dark like a sleeping heart. You smile, whisper a quiet goodnight to it, and drift away under the smoky hush of survival. You wake to the weight of another body beside you, heavy, breathing softly, radiating a faint but precious warmth. Somewhere under the pile of blankets and straw, you can't quite tell if it's your spouse, the youngest child, or possibly the family dog sneaking back into the bed again. At this point, everyone blurs together into one big breathing furnace of survival. The night outside is still deep, but your body knows dawn is crawling closer. You shift under the blankets, careful not to let the cold air slip in. For a few seconds, you lie still, wrapped in the strange intimacy of shared heat. The sound of breathing fills the hut, a soft, human rhythm against the crackle of the hearth's dying coals. This is how you survive the coldest nights, by becoming a bundle of lives stacked together like firewood. It's not just warmth, it's strategy. You reach down and tug the edge of the blanket closer around your feet, making sure there's no escape route for the chill. The straw beneath you rustles, a reminder of its humble job: mattress, insulation, and occasionally, livestock bedding. It pokes your back in the most personal ways. But you've learned to stop complaining. Historians still argue whether peasants really slept shoulder to shoulder every night, or if some families divided the space for a little privacy. But given that your hut could fit inside a modern living room, privacy seems like a luxury reserved for people with stone walls and servants. You, meanwhile, have your spouse's elbow in your ribs and a pig snoring near your feet. Yes, the pig. She's family now. She earns her keep by being both future bacon and current space heater. You chuckle softly at the absurdity. You, your partner, 2 kids, and a pig all huddled together. The Middle Ages may have been grim, but they weren't humorless. At least, you think? She doesn't hog the blanket. That's joke number 1. Got to keep the count going, even in bed. You shift slightly, careful not to wake anyone. The air outside the blanket is cruel, sharp enough to make your skin sting. You can feel it creeping through the cracks in the door, a cold that moves with purpose. as if hunting for bare toes. You tuck your hands under your arms and close your eyes again, trying to cling to sleep. The bed is little more than a wooden frame stuffed with straw and covered in rough wool. It smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and dried herbs. Some nights you sprinkle mint or lavender in the straw, partly for the scent, partly to keep the bugs away. A fringe tidbit you picked up from your grandmother. She swore that mint in the bedding discouraged night spirits from sitting on your chest. Whether that's true or just early pest control, you're not sure, but it does make the bed smell less like barnyard. The children stir beside you. One mumbles in their sleep, their tiny hand brushing your arm. That touch is warmth, yes, but also reassurance, proof that everyone made it through another night. You think of neighbors who weren't so lucky last winter, when sickness came through the village like a thief. Cold nights could take the old, the weak, the unlucky. That's why every sunrise feels earned. When you finally crawled out of bed, the room greets you with a slap of icy air. Your breath blooms white in the dim light. The hearth is barely alive, a faint red glow beneath the ash. You hurry to stir it, whispering to the coals like an old friend. Come on, don't give up on me now. You toss on a small stick, then another. The coals sigh, smoke rises, and slowly, that familiar orange light returns. You stretch your hands over it, savoring the bite of heat against numb fingers. Around you, the rest of the family begins to move, a tangle of blankets, yawns, and morning groans. Even the pig joins in, snorting indignantly as if demanding breakfast. There's no such thing as a soft morning here. You shake the straw from your hair, brush off your tunic, and check the bedding. The straw will need changing soon. It's damp in spots, flattened in others. You'll haul in a fresh bundle later, when the sun climbs higher. For now, you gather the worn straw and toss it near the fire to dry. It'll become tomorrow's fuel. In this world, nothing gets wasted, not even dreams. And there's the second joke, quietly muttered to yourself. At least my bed and my fire have something in common. They both go up in smoke eventually. You glance around the hut. The walls are patched with daub, streaked with soot from years of smoke. In one corner, a rough bench holds a few wooden bowls. The air smells faintly of salt, wool, and ash. It's not cozy by modern standards, but in your bones, you feel the comfort of familiarity. This space holds every moment of your life. Births, meals, laughter, sickness, and all those long, silent nights when the only sound is the breathing of those you love. Outside, a rooster crows, though you suspect it's more confused than enthusiastic. You peek through the doorway. Frost glitters across the fields, and the sun is still just a rumor on the horizon. You pull your cloak tight and step outside, your boots crunching on the frozen ground. The barn stands quiet, but the animals inside shift when they hear you approach. You push the door open, and a wave of warmth greets you. Animal warmth, earthy and damp, carrying the comforting smell of hay and manure. You check on the cow, rub your hands against her side. Her body radiates heat like a living furnace. For a moment, you think about dragging your straw bed in here permanently. There's an odd kind of peace in these moments. The hum of life in the cold. You refill the animal's water, cracking the ice on the trough, and scatter a bit of feed. The pig grunts approvingly when you return, and the children laugh, chasing her tail. The sound of laughter cuts through the frost like sunlight. Back inside, the fire burns brighter now, the hut warmer. Breakfast is simple. Some leftover pottage, maybe a crust of bread softened in warm ile. Everyone eats close to the fire, knees touching, shoulders pressed together. That closeness isn't just habit, it's heritage. Medieval peasants learned long ago that warmth is a community project. You remember stories told by the elders. How, in the dead of winter, neighbors sometimes gathered in one hut for the night, bodies packed tight, stories flowing like shared breath. One tale claims that a dozen villagers once survived a blizzard by singing hymns until sunrise, their voices rising like heat. You're not sure if that's true, but it sounds like something desperate people would do. And maybe that's why it rings real. Historians still argue whether medieval families truly valued togetherness, or if necessity simply forced it upon them. But as you look around your tiny, crowded home, the answer feels obvious. Necessity may have built the habit, but love kept it alive. You notice the pig settling back into her spot near the fire, the belly full and content. The children nestle beside her, giggling softly. The image makes you smile. Somewhere in this unglamorous chaos, this smoky, straw-stuffed, half-frozen hut, there's a kind of peace that feels almost holy. You stretch out your hands toward the fire again. Your knuckles ache, your breath fogs, and yet, you feel something like gratitude. For the warmth, for the bodies beside you, for another night survived. As evening returns, you spread the bedding again, smoothing the straw, shaking out the blankets. You crawl back in with the same ritual movements as always. Right foot first, turn the corner, tuck the edge. Your partner slides in beside you, murmuring something sleepy. The pig joins last, ever reliable. You lie there, eyes half open, watching the embers fade to soft red. The room fills with the gentle chorus of breathing, the faint hiss of the fire, the whisper of wind at the walls. You smile faintly and whisper into the darkness. One made it through another one. Morning breaks without fanfare. Just a faint silver creeping along the rim of the shutter, a signal that the world beyond your blanket has begun its icy routine again. You don't want to move. The warmth you built through the night still clings to the straw mattress. But outside that small cocoon lies the cruel arithmetic of winter work. Your muscles ache before you even stand. Every task feels doubled by the cold. Still, you swing your legs out of bed, feet meeting the dirt floor with a chill, so sharp it feels personal. You mutter, "Morning already owes me an apology." Joke 1. Start the day right. The fire is sluggish, sulking under grey ashes. You kneel and coax it back to life, breath clouding before your face. The spark catches. Light crawls up the stick, and you sigh. Another day, another battle with the frost. There's no rest in winter. The fields may be frozen, but that doesn't mean the work stops. It simply shifts shape. You wrap your cloak tight and step outside. The cold bites instantly, nipping through the wall. The sky is pale, the kind of white that promises no warmth. Your boots crunch across the frost, crusted ground, each step echoing like the sound of breaking glass. Out in the distance, other villagers move, small shapes bent beneath heavy loads. One hauls water from the frozen stream, another chops wood near the tree line. Smoke rises from a few chimneys, curling upward in soft grey ribbons. This is the winter orchestra, the steady rhythm of labor against silence. You join in. The day's first chore is checking the fences around the animals. Overnight frost can make wood brittle, and if the livestock wander, it's not just inconvenience, it's disaster. You run your hand along a post, the rough grain biting your skin. The world feels solid, hard as iron. Even sound seems frozen. Your breath fogs the air as you walk the fence line. Snow crunches beneath you, shallow but stubborn. It's not beautiful, it's indifferent. You tighten a few ropes, wedge a fallen stake upright, and glance toward the woods. The trees stand skeletal, their branches black veins against the sky. It's in moments like this that faith sneaks into your thoughts. Not lofty cathedral faith, but practical faith. You murmur a quick prayer to Saint Isidore, patron of farmers, not for good harvests yet, but simply to keep your hands from going numb before noon. Historians still argue whether peasants prayed because they believed, or because it was the only thing they could control. You think it's both. Out here, belief fills the space where certainty freezes solid. By midday, Your body has found its rhythm. The motion keeps you warm, even as your fingers sting. You carry bundles of kindling, patch the roof of the shed, sharpen the blade on a worn scythe. Not for today's use, but for spring. There's something oddly comforting in preparing for seasons that still feel impossible. You pause, wiping your nose with your sleeve, and let your gaze drift over the fields. Beneath the frost, life is merely sleeping. The soil may be locked now, but come thaw, it will yield again. You hold on to that thought like a secret flame. Back at the hut, your spouse and eldest child have begun their own labors. Wool to card, water to fetch, bread to bake. Every motion a small defiance of cold. You take your seat by the door and begin mending a tool handle. The rhythm of the knife and the smell of smoke create a quiet, sort of meditation. You catch yourself humming the same tune your father used to hum when patching tools. It's not much of a song, more like a melody of persistence. Between verses, you glance at your hands, cracked, red, and raw. They don't feel like your own anymore. They belong to winter. Then there are the days when work takes you further, to the frozen river, where you join others breaking the ice to catch fish. You grip the handle of a crude spear, breath sharp in your chest. The first strike sends splinters of ice flying, cold needles against your face. Beneath the surface, the water moves slow but steady, a reminder that even under the frost, the world breathes. You kneel, hands numb, and wait for movement. A flicker, a fish darting beneath the glassy surface. You strike fast. The spear slips, the fish escapes, and a few nearby voices laugh. You grin, shaking your head. He probably just wasn't Catholic enough. You mutter, and the laughter turns to approval. Joke 2. Humor as shield. When you finally catch one, a small, silver prize, you hold it up to the grey sky like a trophy. Not much, but it's protein, and that means strength. You tuck it into your satchel and head home, boots squelching through snowmelt. Inside the hut, the heat feels like an embrace. The hearth burns strong. The children sit close to it, and the smell of stew lingers in the air. You drop your catch near the pot with a flourish, pretending to bow, as if you've returned from some heroic quest. The kids clap, and your spouse rolls their eyes affectionately. Dinner fit for kings, you announce. Tiny, bony kings. Third joke complete. Evening settles early. The light fades and the village quiets. Outside, frost creeps across the ground like spilled silver. You step out once more, checking that the animals are secure. Your breath steams. The stars scatter sharp above you. The night air feels alive, whispering through the trees. You look toward the manor on the hill. Faint light glows in its high windows. Somewhere up there, the Lord's household feasts beside great fires, their tables heavy with roasted meats and mulled wine. You feel no envy, only a kind of distant curiosity. Their warmth is built on your labor, their comfort drawn from your endurance. And yet, you know they could never survive one of your nights. Not really. The path back to your hut glimmers under moonlight. Your footsteps crunch softly, a rhythm older than memory. You glance at your breath floating in the air and imagine it joining the ghosts of all the peasants who ever walked this same ground. Millions of small, stubborn lives breathing through winter. Back inside, you hang your cloak and collapse onto your stool. The fire paints the room in amber light. Your spouse hands you a wooden cup of ale, weak but warm. The first sip burns faintly, the second soothes. You exhale, feeling your body loosen for the first time all day. You listen to the children's laughter, the crackle of the fire, the wind outside. It all blends into a lullaby of survival. There's no grandeur here, no glory. Just the quiet triumph of making it through another day. Historians write about wars, kings, revolutions. But if they ever sat here, by this small fire, with cracked hands and a full belly, they'd understand a different kind of history. The one written not in ink, but in breath and frost and flame. You stretch, glance toward the window where the stars blink faintly, and think about tomorrow's chores. Wood, water, mending, maybe a trip to the forest edge. The repetition could drive a lesser spirit mad, but you find a rhythm in it, almost a peace. The cold hums outside, relentless and eternal. But inside, the hearth glows, the straw bed waits, and your family is safe. You smile to yourself, tired but content. One more day beaten. You whisper. The morning arrives behind a curtain of grey. The air feels thicker than usual, dense with the scent of smoke and barley, and something faintly sour. Last night's stew clinging to the walls. You sit up slowly, stretching until your spine pops like firewood. Your stomach growls before your eyes are even open. The cold takes energy, more than you ever expect, and hunger is the tax it collects daily. You glance toward the pot hanging over the hearth. What's left of the pottage looks unpromising. A few limp vegetables, a spoonful of barley, and a thin skim of fat that has solidified overnight into something resembling candle wax. Still, it's food. You grab a spoon and chip away, muttering, breakfast of champions, if the champions were mice. Joke 1, to make the day start on the right note. The truth is, peasants in winter lived more by illusion than indulgence. The soil's generosity had ended months ago. Whatever survived the cold, root vegetables, salted meat, the occasional grain, had to be stretched across weeks. You eat small portions not because you're modest, but because you must pretend fullness is a choice. You add a little water to the pot and reheat it. The thin broth begins to bubble, and steam fogs the air. That smell, earthy, smoky, faintly sweet from the barley, is strangely comforting. It's the scent of effort. Historians still argue whether peasants truly experienced hunger seasons as acutely as records claim, or if the chronic malnutrition of daily life simply dulled the edges. Standing here, scraping the sides of the pot, you suspect the answer is both. You divide the meal carefully among wooden bowls. Everyone gets something, though none of it will silence the belly for long. The children eat quickly, spoons clinking against the bowls like bells. Your spouse eats slowly, pretending not to notice the portion they push toward you when they think you're not looking. You sigh, give them a look, and then take the extra anyway. It's not heroism, it's practicality. You're the one chopping wood later. The fire spits once, sending a spark toward the wall. You bat it away with the ladle and grin. Even the fire wants breakfast. Joke 2. After eating, you move to the storage chest near the door. It creaks open, revealing your winter treasury, a few wrinkled turnips, 2 onions, a lump of salted pork, and a small cloth bag of barley. You lift the bag reverently. This is the difference between surviving and starving. You pour a little into your hand, watching the grains roll across your palm. Each one looks like a promise, and like all promises, you must ration them. You remember how last autumn you and your neighbors worked the fields until the sky bled orange, gathering what little the land gave. You dried apples, smoked meat, buried carrots and parsnips under layers of straw in the cellar. Everything became part of a grand game against time. How long could you delay the moment when hunger became the loudest voice in the house? Some nights, that voice wins. You pour the barley back into its sack, tie it tight, and tuck it behind the chest, as if hiding treasure from thieves. Hunger, after all, is the most persistent thief of all. To distract yourself, you turn to one of the few comforts winter allows: cooking experiments. You chop the smallest onion, drop it into the pot with water, and stir. You add a pinch of salt. Precious, hard-won salt, traded for wool last month. The taste doesn't change much, but the ritual feels like power. As the stew simmers, your thoughts wander to the odd little tricks peasants used to fool their stomachs. You've heard of people boiling bark or adding sawdust to bread to make it last longer. Once, when the snow buried the fields for weeks, You even tried steeping acorns. The bitterness nearly made you cry, but you chewed anyway. A fringe tidbit floats back from memory in some villages. The poorest boiled stones in a pot to make stone soup, pretending the smell alone could feed the children until real food came. You think about it often. Not as a joke, but as a kind of poetry. Pretend enough, and even the impossible feels nourishing. You taste the pottage again. It's bland watery, but warm. Warm counts. Outside, the wind howls through the cracks, rattling the door. You sip slowly, imagining feasts you'll never see. The Lord's table, glittering with roasted meats, honeyed pears, thick loaves of white bread. You picture the grease shining on fingers, the clatter of goblets, the music echoing through the hall. Then you look at your wooden bowl and chuckle softly. Different menus, same hunger. By midday, the hunger dulls into background noise. You busy yourself repairing a basket, the steady rhythm keeping your thoughts from wandering too far. Still, every time someone opens the door, a gust of cold air sweeps in, and your stomach clenches as if the wind itself might carry food away. Later, a neighbor stops by, a wary man named Martin, wrapped in a cloak that has seen too many winters. He brings news someone found a dead deer near the woods, half frozen but still edible, a gift from the cold. The two of you exchange glances, and without a word, grab your knives and head out. The forest is silent except for the whisper of snow falling from branches. The deer lies stiff under a veil of frost, eyes glazed like glass. It feels almost sacred. You kneel, touch its flank. The meat won't last long, but it's enough to share. Enough to make tonight a feast. Back in the village, the smell of roasting venison fills the air. You and Martin divide the meat fairly, half for his family, half for yours. Everyone gathers near the fire, eyes bright. For the first time in weeks, the hut feels alive. The fat sizzles, the air turns rich with promise. When you bite into that first piece, it's almost too much. The flavor floods your senses, smoke, salt, sweetness. You close your eyes and let out a quiet sigh that sounds suspiciously like a prayer. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant's diet was as miserable as it's often painted, or if moments like this, shared hunts, communal meals, made it bearable. Standing here, licking the grease from your fingers, you decide that truth tastes like both hunger and gratitude. After dinner, bellies full for once, laughter rises easily. Someone makes a joke about the deer volunteering for the pot. Someone else claims they saw fairies guiding it through the snow. You laugh until your sides ache. Warmth, food, company, three luxuries that, when combined, make the world feel almost civilized. Later, when the fire dies to embers, you sit with your spouse, watching the shadows sway on the walls. The children sleep in a heap near the corner. The pigs snore softly. The scent of cooked meat still lingers, faint but comforting. You lean back and murmur, "If hunger comes knocking tomorrow, we'll just tell him we're out." Joke 3, quietly delivered to the dark. The laughter fades, replaced by silence. But it's not the sharp silence of fear. It's the contented stillness of satisfaction. You feel the heaviness of a full belly, the calm ache of honest work, the fragile peace that comes from knowing that, for tonight, you've beaten winter's most dangerous trick. Evening has a way of softening the edges of cold. The chores end, the light fades, and the village hum shifts from the clatter of work to something quieter. Something that smells faintly of barley and half-forgotten songs. You stretch your arms, hear your joints pop, and think time to chase a different kind of warmth. You step outside. The air bites at first, then settles into a kind of truce. Lanterns glow along the lane, little puddles of gold in the dark. From somewhere near the green comes the familiar sound of laughter. The tavern, that patch of flickering heaven, where all is thin, company thick, and rules negotiable. You push open the door, and the smell hits smoke, sweat, yeast, and roasted barley. It's not pleasant, exactly, but it feels alive. Every face inside is red, cheeked and half, lit by firelight. Someone bangs a mug on the table, someone else sings off, key. The noise wraps around you like a rough blanket. You hand over a single coin. Painful, but worth it. And the tavern keeper fills your mug halfway with small ale. It's barely stronger than water, but it's safe to drink and carries the ghost of warmth. You sip, and the bitterness nips at your tongue like the cold outside. Ah, you mutter. Taste of regret with a barley finish. Joke 1, met with approving chuckles from the nearest table. Small ale is the peasant's secret weapon. Brewed weak on purpose, it's drunk morning to night, by everyone from toddlers to elders. You'd think it would make the village perpetually drunk, but the truth is more practical. Water often isn't safe. An ale, boiled and fermented, kills what might kill you. Hydration with attitude. You take another sip, feel it trickle warmth down your throat. The mug's rim is nicked, the handle sticky. Doesn't matter. What matters is the company. At the next table, Martin, your dear, dividing friend, waves you over. He's already 2 mugs ahead, eyes bright, smile wide. You survived another day, he says, as if survival were a feat worth toasting. He's right. You sit, mugs clink, conversation flows. The topics bounce between weather, crops, taxes, and the Lord's questionable hairstyle. Someone claims he saw a fox wearing a chicken feather crown. Someone else swears their cow started singing last night. All turns exaggeration into entertainment. Historians still argue whether taverns truly were the social hearts of medieval villages, or if that's a romantic gloss laid over cramped, smoky rooms like this. But sitting here, you can feel it. It's the only place where laughter drowns out hunger, where people forget hierarchy for an hour or two. You glance at the fire in the corner, its glow throwing long shadows across the faces around you. For once, no one's shivering. The heat, the ale, the noise, all of it merges into something almost sacred. Beside the fire, a fiddler begins to play. The tune is uneven, missing a few notes, but it gets feet tapping. You find yourself joining in, thumping the table, singing a line or two when you recognize the words. It's the same song your grandmother used to hum when stirring stew, part prayer, part nonsense. As the rhythm builds, a woman stands and begins to dance. Her skirts sway, boots thudding against the floorboards. The crowd claps, the fiddler grins, and for a heartbeat, winter doesn't exist. You catch Martin watching with that unmistakable look of early, evening bravery. Go on, you tease. She might even let you fetch her all if you bow low enough. He laughs, elbows you, and actually does it, tripping halfway there, earning himself both laughter and applause. Joke 2, gifted to the room now instead of just yourself. Ale has a way of loosening time. Minutes slide by unnoticed. The fire burns low, then high again as someone tosses on another log. The smell of wood smoke seeps into your hair, your clothes, your skin. It's a perfume of survival. Eventually the talk turns more serious. The tax is due after Yuletide. The rumors of sickness 2 villages over. The whispers that the Lord might raise grain levies again. The laughter dims, but not entirely. The tavern's rule is simply you can complain, but only between songs. You sip the last of your ale, watching the foam swirl. You've heard tales that monks, those solemn keepers of knowledge, brew far better stuff in their cloisters. Thick and sweet enough to make a man forget his sins for a night. Some say travelers who taste it never drink anything else again. Others claim it's just legend. A quirky truth, though, is that many abbeys did brew stronger ales for sale to townsfolk, their barrels stamped with the sign of the cross. Salvation, 1 pence at a time. A bell somewhere in the distance tolls for curfew. A few villagers grumble, but the sound is ignored for a while longer. Who wants to trade warmth for frost just yet? You linger until your mug is empty, Then push yourself to standing. The floor sways slightly. Not from drink, just from fatigue. And you steady yourself with a laugh. Martin waves you off with a mock salute. And you step out into the cold night. The air outside feels sharper, but the all leaves a faint warmth blooming in your chest. You walk slowly, boots crunching in the thin crust of snow, your breath puffing like smoke signals to the stars. The moon hangs low, fat and pale, and for once it feels less like an eye watching you, and more like a lamp guiding you home. Your hut waits at the edge of the village, a darker shadow against darkness. Through the cracks, you see the flicker of your own hearth. The door creaks open. Your spouse looks up from the fire, half smiling. "Did you win the tavern tonight?" they ask. "Won a few laughs," you say, setting down your mug. "Lost the argument about whether bread counts as food if it's frozen solid." Joke 3. Rewarded with an amused shake of the head. You settle beside the fire, shoes steaming faintly, and lean back. The hum of the tavern still buzzes in your mind. The warmth, the faces, the noise. It's not much, but it fills the cracks that hunger and cold carve out. You take the last sip from your mug, lukewarm now, mostly water, and think about how many generations have done exactly this drink. Laugh, walk home under the same moon. The thought comforts you more than the drink ever could. Historians might write about kings and wars, but you know the real story is simpler. Civilization survives one cup at a time, one laugh between storms. Tomorrow you'll wake before dawn again, face the frost, patch fences, mend roofs. But tonight, you feel rich, with warmth, with noise, with belonging. You stretch, yawn, and let your eyelids grow heavy. Outside, the wind starts to pick up again, brushing against the door like an old friend checking in. You whisper a good night to the unseen cold, and let the fire's last light fade across your face. The cough starts before dawn. You hear it through the walls, low, rough, wet. For a moment, you think it's one of the pigs snuffling, but then you realize it's your youngest. The sound cuts through the stillness like a blunt knife. You sit up, heart thudding, and move toward the straw bed where the children sleep in a huddle. Their cheeks are flushed, breath ragged. You touch a forehead. Hot, too hot. The cold outside has sharpened, and inside, the air is thick with smoke and worry. You mutter a prayer under your breath, half to God, half to your own nerves. Just a chill. You whisper, as if saying it aloud can make it true. The fire smolders, weak and sulking, so you toss on another stick. The hut fills with that familiar blend of smoke and warmth. Medieval heating wasn't a luxury, it was a gamble. Too little fire, and you freeze. Too much, and you cough your lungs out before sunrise. The sweet spot between warmth and suffocation is narrower than a chicken's wishbone. Your spouse stirs. One look at the child's face tells you both the same thing. This isn't nothing. You dig through the shelf above the hearth for the small pouch of herbs given by the village healer. The contents smell sharp and bitter. Dried thyme, a pinch of rosemary, maybe some questionable dust that used to be something medicinal. You toss a handful into hot water, stir, and let the steam rise. The air fills with a scent that's half kitchen, half church incense. "Drink," you murmur, helping the child sit up. The eyes flutter open, tired and glassy. The cup trembles between small hands. The liquid goes down slowly, and they cough again, this time a little softer. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine helped or merely distracted the sick from dying. Some remedies worked. Honey for wounds, willow bark for pain. But others read like cruel joke crushed snails for fevers, pigeon droppings for swelling, or, in one memorable case, a poultice of raw eel for sore throats. You tried that one once as a child. The eel won. You glance around the hut. The air seems to hum with sickness. It's the season for it. The cold drives everyone indoors, sharing warmth and germs alike. The hearth becomes both savior and saboteur, It keeps you alive. But its smoke fills the lungs with slow poison. A fringe fact drifts to mind. Peasants often blackened the ceilings of their homes not through neglect, but inevitability. Without chimneys, the smoke lingered, staining everything it touched. People joked that if the soot got thick enough, you could scrape it down and sell it as ink. You'd laugh if your child weren't wheezing. You open the shutter to let some air in. A gust of cold slices through the room, shocking everyone awake. The wind smells of frost and manure, but at least it's fresh. You take a deep breath and almost cough yourself. The irony isn't lost on you. Healing, one lung at a time, you mumble. Joke 1. You glance outside. Across the lane, a figure in a hooded cloak trudges toward your door. It's Agnes, the village herb woman, her silhouette outlined in mist. She knocks once, then steps in without waiting. Everyone does in winter. Doors are suggestions, not barriers. Agnes sets down her bundle of dried plants. Bad air, she says, sniffing the smoky air. Needs thyme and faith. You nod. Faith's always the cheapest remedy. She moves efficiently, laying herbs near the fire, muttering words half Latin, half local dialect. It's more performance than potion, but performance is half the cure. As she works, she tells stories of saints who cured illness with a touch, of devils who caused fevers just for fun. Her voice is gravelly, rhythmic, oddly soothing. You listen, not because you believe every word, but because the sound itself is medicine. She pulls a small vial from her pouch and pours a few drops of something dark into a cup. "I'll with honey," she says. "Drink it warm. You'll sweat out the sickness." You nod, though you suspect the real effect comes from the owl, not the honey. Historians still debate whether village healers were respected or feared. In truth, they were both. Saints when they saved a child, witches when they failed. Agnes seems unconcerned by either label. She gathers her things, pats the child's head, and says, "Keep the fire breathing, but not too proud." Then she's gone, back into the mist. You sit by the hearth again, watching the embers shift from red to gold. The child's breathing steadies, a little. Your own chest feels tight, not from sickness, but from the memory of winters, when healing came too late. You think of the plague stories told by your grandparents. Villages emptied, priests ringing bells, carts rolling through streets piled with straw, and silence. They said the air itself turned against people, invisible and unstoppable. You wonder what it felt like to fear breathing. Then again, maybe you already know. The day passes in slow loops of care, stoking the fire, mixing herbs, praying, resting. You can't tell whether the fever breaks because of your effort or in spite of it. The child sleeps at last, face damp, chest rising steady. You sit beside them, letting the quiet settle. Evening comes with a thin blue light that leaks through the shutter cracks. The hut smells of smoke, thyme, and relief. You pour yourself the last of the ole, now more herbal tonic than drink, and take a cautious sip. The warmth spreads, gentle and steady. You raise the cup to the ceiling. To Agnes, you whisper, "Onto stubborn lungs." Joke 2. Your spouse chuckles softly, then sneezes. "Your turn next," they say. You groan theatrically, clutching your chest. "No, no. I'm far too handsome to perish." The laughter that follows feels like proof of life. Later, as darkness folds around the hut, you listen to the sounds outside, a dog barking, wind scraping against wood, somewhere far off, a wolf's distant cry. You think about how thin the walls are between safety and exposure, between life and sickness. It's always been this way. Survival is a habit, not a guarantee. You pull the blanket up over the sleeping child and watch the fire shrink. The last coals glow like tiny suns, each one a heartbeat of heat. You lean close, whispering a thank you to them, ridiculous as it sounds. They've done more for you than most lords ever will. And then, because humor is the only armor left, you mutter, If I live long enough, I'm building a house with a chimney. Joke 3. Your spouse mumbles agreement from the straw bed. The child sighs in their sleep. You settle beside the fire, shoulders heavy, eyes half closed. Historians write about the grand medical theories, the four humours, the balance of bile and blood. But sitting here, you know the truth was simpler warmth, rest, love, and luck. All four cost dearly, but only one could be bought. The smoke thickens slightly, stinging your eyes. You let them close anyway. Somewhere between the fire's hiss and the child's steady breathing, you drift towards sleep. Outside, frost begins to form on the windows, drawing white veins like a painter's final touch. By the time the next morning crawls in, the fever has broken. The child's breathing is steady, cheeks pale but cool. You wake with a sigh that feels like you've been holding it for a week. Outside, frost glitters like powdered glass, and the air smells crisp, cleaner than it has in days. The world, it seems, has decided to be merciful for once. It's the middle of winter's heart. But that also means something else, the feast of St. Bridget, Candlemas, or whatever name your corner of the world gives to that fragile spark of midwinter hope. Even peasants need a festival, especially peasants. You stretch, wash your face with icy water that bites harder than guilt, and grin. Today, there will be candle songs, and maybe even meat that isn't stolen from a fox. The morning routine still demands obedience. The fire needs feeding, the animals need checking, the air still tastes like frost. But everything feels lighter because of the promise of celebration. You hum as you chop wood, and even though your breath fogs the air, like a smoke signal, it almost feels like spring might believe the invitation. Festivals were the peasants' clockwork of survival. Tiny bursts of joy that divided one long, grey year into pieces small enough to bear. Historians still argue whether such feast days offered true rest, or were just clever ways for the church to keep people working without despairing. But as you shoulder your bundle of wood and head toward the churchyard, you're not thinking about theology. You're thinking about warmth, food, and noise. The chapel stands crooked on the hill, half buried in snow, its bell silent for now. Villagers gather outside, wrapped in their best tunics. Best, meaning least, patched. The air buzzes with laughter and the scrape of boots. Someone's brought a jug of ale, and the smell of baking bread wafts from a nearby hearth. The priest appears, his robes dusted with ash from his own hearth, looking more like a tired baker than a man of God. He raises a hand for silence and begins the prayers. You bow your head, mumbling along, though your mind wanders to the smell of stew somewhere nearby. The prayers blend into songs, slow at first, then lively. Someone starts clapping. Another stamps their feet, and the priest sighs but doesn't stop them. You suspect he enjoys it as much as anyone. The music echoes across the snow, bright and reckless. After the blessings, the real business of celebration begins. Candles flicker in every hand, tiny flames trembling against the cold. The light spills over faces, turning each one into something softer, almost holy. For a moment, you imagine the saints themselves might be leaning closer, warming their spectral hands beside yours. As night falls, the feast begins. Tables, really just planks laid over barrels, appear in the square. Bowls of stew, hunks of bread, dried apples, and the occasional slab of salted meat make their rounds. You scoop a portion into your bowl, the steam curling like incense. The flavor is simple cabbage, barley, a hint of pork fat. But it tastes like triumph. Not bad. You murmur. For soup that's met more spoons than ingredients. Joke 1, delivered with a grin that earns a laugh from Martin, who's already halfway through his second bowl. The ale flows, the songs grow bolder, and the cold becomes irrelevant. You join in the chorus, clapping along as a fiddler strikes up a tune. Children chase each other between the benches. Elders trade stories about winters worse than this one. Though somehow, those tales always end with them winning. A fringe tidbit makes you chuckle. Someone once told you that in certain villages, people would bless their livestock during these festivals by leading them through the church door, tail first. So the devil couldn't sneak in behind. You glance toward the nearby barn and briefly imagine a line of sheep kneeling before the altar. Faith and absurdity, best friends since forever. The priest raises a cup, muttering a blessing, and you join the toast. "To warmth," someone shouts. "To full bellies," another answers. "To surviving until planting season," you add, and the cheer that follows feels earned. The fire in the square burns bright now, fed by logs and optimism. Sparks dance upward, vanishing into the night. You move closer, hands outstretched, and let the heat soak into your palms. The air hums with laughter and singing. For the first time in months, your shoulders loosen. Historians still debate whether medieval festivals were acts of rebellion or resignation. Small escapes from oppression, or just sanctioned distractions. Standing here, with stew in your belly and warmth on your face, it doesn't matter. Joy, even borrowed joy, feels like resistance. As the evening deepens, someone starts telling stories. You sit cross-legged near the fire, the orange light flickering across familiar faces. Tales of saints and miracles spill out. How Saint Bridget turned water into beer, a personal favorite. Or how a peasant once tricked death by offering him a seat by the fire until spring came. You laugh, you listen, you forget the ache in your hands. Then comes the darker side of the storytelling, the reminders that faith burns brighter against fear. The priest speaks of fasting before Lent, of the virtue of sacrifice. Tomorrow, food will once again shrink to thin gruel and black bread, but tonight, everyone eats freely. The contrast is deliberate, a furnace of devotion and denial. The idea of fasting seems almost comical after this much but you nod solemnly anyway. The rhythm of the year demands its dance, steps, feast, fast, repent, repeat. Someone starts a slower song now. A haunting tune about a lost traveler guided home by a candle in a window. The melody lingers in the air like mist. You close your eyes, listening. The notes seem to brush against memory. The faces you've lost to winter, the prayers that never got answered. Still, the song ends in hope, and that feels like enough. You open your eyes to see the priest dozing in his chair, head tilted back, mouth open. You nudge Martin and whisper. If he snores in Latin, we're all forgiven. Joke 2. The resulting snort of laughter earns you a glare from the priest's wife, which only makes it better. By midnight, the crowd begins to thin. Families head home through the snow, candles flickering like wandering stars. You walk slowly, arm in arm with your spouse, the child bundled against your side. The night feels softer somehow. Cold, yes, but kind. The moon glows high, painting the world in silver. As you reach your hut, you pause to look back. The last of the firelight still glows in the square, a fading heartbeat of warmth. You think of all the winters behind you, all the ones ahead, and the strange miracle that humanity hasn't yet given up on celebration. You open the door, step inside, and hang your cloak. The room is quiet, filled only with the crackle of the hearth. You pour what's left of the ale into 2 cups, hand one to your spouse, and raise yours in a sleepy toast. To faith, you murmur. Or whatever this is. They smile, clinking your cup. To whatever this is. You drink, set the cup down, and settle onto the straw bed. The warmth seeps into your bones. The music from the square drifts faintly through the wind. A reminder that, for one night, at least, life managed to outsing the cold. The festival's glow fades fast. By morning, the air returns to its familiar edge. Sharp, quiet, suspiciously sober. You wake with a dry throat, the faint taste of barley lingering like a memory of happiness. The snow outside glints, too bright, reflecting light straight into your skull. You blink hard, mutter something about divine punishment, and drag yourself upright. The hearth is cold. Again. Always. You poke the ashes until a reluctant spark flickers, coaxing it back to life with the same patience you'd use on a stubborn mule. The world beyond the hut is muffled in silence, too still, as if it's waiting for something to crack. You step outside. The air slaps you awake instantly. Crisp, metallic, clean enough to sting. Your breath ghosts in front of you, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. It's faint, but it's real. You stand still, listening. There it is again, long, mournful, echoing through the valley. You tell yourself it's far off. It always sounds farther than it is. Nights like these aren't just cold, they're alive. Every creak of wood, every shift of snow becomes a whisper of danger. Wolves, bandits, spirits. You never know which one's testing the door first. You head toward the barn to check the animals. Their breath fogs the air. Their eyes gleam in the dim light. They're nervous tonight. Hooves shifting, ears twitching. Even the old cow, usually half asleep, keeps glancing at the door. You mutter, "I know, I heard it too. Joke one." But your voice sounds smaller than usual. Historians still argue whether wolves truly terrorized medieval villages as much as the legends claim, or if their howls just gave shape to deeper fears. Hunger, cold, the reminder that people weren't the only predators trying to survive. You're not sure which truth feels scarier. You shovel a little more hay, pat the cow's side, and bolt the barn door tight. Then, as you turn back toward the hut, you see it. Faint tracks in the snow, leading from the tree line. Not fresh, but not old either. Large. Too large for a dog. You crouch down, trace the print with your finger. The shape is clear, the claws sharp. You exhale slowly. Back inside, you bar the door. The wooden latch suddenly feels too thin, too small. You glance toward your sleeping family, the faint rise and fall of blankets, and make a silent promise to the night not tonight. The wind picks up, brushing against the shutters like a cautious hand. You sit by the hearth, knife in hand, whittling a stick you don't need to whittle. It's just something to do, while the dark listens. Time stretches. The only sounds are the crackle of the fire and the occasional groan of the timbers. You almost convince yourself you imagined the howl. Almost. Then it comes again, closer now. You freeze. Even the fire seems to quiet itself. Outside, the snow crunches. Once, twice. Something moves beyond the door. You hold your breath, every nerve taut as a bowstring. Then, just as suddenly, silence. A pause long enough to make your imagination sprint in circles. You whisper a prayer, half Latin, half panic, and wait. The wind shifts again, rattling the latch, and then nothing. Just the long exhale of the night. You let your shoulders drop, laugh quietly at yourself. Probably Martin, drunk and lost again. You mutter. Joke two, whispered like a charm. Still, you keep the knife close as you lie back down, half wrapped in a blanket, half listening to every creak. The dark outside feels thicker than usual, as if something's pressing against it. Eventually, sleep catches you, thin and restless. Your dreams are strange, trees swaying like giants, glowing eyes in the branches, a figure standing by your door, humming the same tavern tune from 2 nights ago. You wake before dawn, sweat cold on your neck. The world looks normal again, which somehow feels disappointing. You open the door to find a layer of fresh snow, erasing all evidence of the night's noises. The sky blushes faintly pink. The cold bites, but in that clean, bracing way that tells you you're alive. You spot Martin stumbling up the path, wrapped in a fur cloak, face red. "Morning," he says, yawning. "Heard the wolves last night." You nod. "Sounded close." He shrugs. "They keep to the woods, mostly. Unless they're starving." The two of you stand in silence, staring toward the tree line. The forest looks harmless in daylight, just a blur of white and brown. But you both know better. there's a strange comfort in shared fear. It reminds you you're not alone in the watching. Historians still debate what terrified medieval villagers more: real predators or imagined ones. The answer, you think, doesn't matter. Fear doesn't need evidence, it just needs darkness. By afternoon, you've mostly shaken it off. The rhythm of chores returns: mending tools, patching roofs, feeding animals. The air smells faintly of thaw, as if the season's grip might be weakening. Still, when dusk comes again, you stack extra wood near the hearth, just in case. Dinner is simple bread onion, and broth thinned so far you can almost see your reflection in it. Your spouse sighs and says, "If it gets any thinner, we can use it as window glass." You snort. "Good. At least we'll finally have a view." Joke 3, met with tired laughter. The child asks about the wolves. You glance toward the door, then back to the fire. "They're afraid of fire," you say. It's not entirely true, but it's the kind of lie that helps people sleep. Night falls again, soft and deliberate. You sit closer to the fire than usual. Outside, the wind whispers through the trees, but tonight, it sounds less like a threat and more like a lullaby for those who dare to listen. You think about the darkness. How much of it is made of real danger, and how much you invent just to keep yourself alert. Maybe fear is its own kind of survival tool. It keeps you sharp, alive, awake when the cold tries to lull you into stillness. The coals shift, glowing deeper. You stretch out on the straw, blanket wrapped tight, knife still within reach but hand finally relaxed. If there are wolves out there, you think, let them sing. You've got your own music: crackling fire, steady breath, the heartbeat of the world refusing to freeze. Morning arrives like a sigh. The frost still laces the window edges, but you can feel something subtle shifting. The light has changed. It's a little less blue, a little more forgiving. Maybe the season's turning, maybe it's just your imagination. Either way, the village seems to stretch awake with you. Chickens cluck again, dogs bark. The church bell rings, not for mourning this time, but for a wedding. You raise an eyebrow at that. A wedding in midwinter is like planting beans in snow. Optimistic, possibly foolish, but definitely entertaining. You pull on your patched tunic and step outside, squinting at the procession making its way toward the chapel. The bride wears a faded linen dress with a wreath of dried ivy, and the groom looks like he borrowed his best shirt from 3 different cousins. You join the crowd because, really, who's going to skip a free meal and a bit of gossip? The church smells of damp wool, candles, and faint excitement. The priest looks half frozen, his breath visible as he drones through the ceremony. But the couple just beam at each other like the sun might come up just for them. "Do you take this woman?" He nods, quick and certain. "Do you take this man?" She hesitates. Half a second, half a smirk, then says, "If he can still chop wood come spring." The crowd erupts in laughter. You add a quiet, "That's love," medieval edition. Joke 1, met with approving snorts from your neighbors. The vow's done. Everyone spills back into the square. Someone strikes up a fiddle, and the dancing begins. The ground's too hard to move gracefully, but no one cares. Cloaks flap, boots stomp, and laughter steams in the cold air. You spot Martin already clutching a mug of ale, waving you over. "To marriage!" he shouts. You clink cups and take a gulp that burns pleasantly. Weddings, you realize, are more than ceremony. They're strategy. Every union means another pair of hands to share labor, another alliance between families, another potential line of defense when things turn lean. Even love, in the peasant sense, is a kind of survival tactic. Historians still argue whether marriage among the lower classes was mostly arranged for practicality or affection. But watching the couple now, her cheeks flushed, his hands trembling as they try to dance, you decide maybe it doesn't matter. Survival has always found its own romance. Later, When the music slows, you wander closer to the fire pit, where a group of women are gossiping. They talk about dowries, how small they've become, how lucky anyone is to marry at all when the harvest's been thin. Someone mentions a family that couldn't afford candles for their wedding, so they used glowworms in jars. A fringe tidbit may be exaggerated, but you like the image. Two peasants getting married by the dim shimmer of bugs, vowing eternal love by bioluminescence. You sip your ale and chuckle. Nothing says commitment like insects lighting the way. Joke 2. The woman beside you elbows you gently grinning. As the sun dips lower, the newlyweds lead everyone to their cottage. A modest thatch, roof hut just finished last week. Inside, it smells of new straw, smoke, and faint hope. They've even got a small hearth, though the fire sputters uncertainly, as if shy about its responsibility. And then comes the part no one admits out loud, but everyone knows: the bedding. In most villages, the wedding night isn't exactly private. Neighbors crowd the small room, singing bawdy songs, cheering as the couple climbs into bed. Someone throws a handful of grain for fertility. Someone else pours ale on the floor for luck. You stand near the back, pretending to be deeply interested in the ceiling beams. Remember, Martin whispers, you're supposed to steal one of the groom's socks for good fortune. You give him a look that says, absolutely not. Joke 3 delivered with a glare, received with a wheezy laugh. When the laughter fades, and the door finally closes, you step back into the cold. The night smells of smoke and ale, and somewhere behind you, muffled giggles fade into soft silence. You find yourself smiling, despite everything. Love, here, isn't like the stories nobles tell. No sonnets or jewels, just two people sharing a blanket, and the belief that tomorrow will still be survivable. As you walk home, the stars scatter across the sky, so sharp they could cut. Your own hut glows faintly from the fire inside. When you step through the door, your spouse looks up from mending a shirt. You missed half the fun, they say. I saw enough, you reply, hanging your cloak. Though next time, we should get invited to a noble's wedding. More bread, less singing. They laugh softly, setting aside the needle. You'd still complain about the owl? You grin, probably. You sit beside the hearth, warming your hands. The fire pops, spitting tiny sparks that leap and die. You glance at your spouse, really seeing them. Hair tangled, eyes tired, hands rough from work. And yet, in the dim firelight, they look more beautiful than any noble's painted lady. Do you ever regret it? You ask quietly. This life. They shrug. It's hard, but at least it's ours. That answer sits deep in your chest. You reach out, take their hand. The world outside might still be frozen, but here, in this small circle of warmth, it feels like spring. Later, as you crawl under the blanket, the straw creaking beneath you, you feel the slow, steady rhythm of shared breath. The same warmth that peasants have relied on for centuries. The most ancient kind of heat, born from two hearts refusing to freeze. Historians still argue whether medieval marriages were more pragmatic than emotional. But you think about this, maybe the truest form of love is the one that makes surviving another winter feel slightly less impossible. Morning trudges back in, grey and grudging, as though the sky itself hasn't finished sobering up from the wedding aisle. You wake to the familiar duet of creaking rafters and a rooster that sounds more hungover than heroic. The world outside the door is still white and brittle, but the snow's thinning in places, revealing patches of brown earth beneath. Ugly, promising real. You stretch, groaning as your joints protest. Winter may be fading, but that only means one thing: taxes. You can almost feel the chill deepen at the thought. The steward from the manor will soon make his rounds, tallying grain, counting livestock, and pretending he doesn't notice the way people's smiles freeze when he approaches. You gulp down a quick breakfast, bread hard as a rock, and the last of the onion stew, and step outside to harness the donkey. The tax carts need to be loaded before the Lord's men arrive. Ah yes, you mutter. My favorite part of the year. Being thanked for surviving by losing half of what kept me alive. Joke 1. Muttered under your breath to no one in particular. The road to the manor is slush and misery. Puddles soak through your boots. Your toes numb before you've even left the village. Along the way, you pass neighbors doing the same. Grim parades of peasants with sacks of grain, baskets of eggs, the occasional reluctant chicken clucking its protest. Everyone avoids eye contact, as though acknowledging each other's suffering might make it worse. Historians still argue whether medieval taxes were as brutal as legend paints them. Some say they were consistent, predictable even, just another rhythm in the agricultural year. Others insist they were crushing, designed to keep peasants forever kneeling. You, hauling your meagre dues through the sludge, suspect it was a bit of both. Regular misery with occasional flourishes of cruelty. The manor rises ahead, grey stone against greyer sky. Smoke trails from its chimneys, fat and lazy. The kind of smoke that comes from fires built with logs bigger than your arm. The smell of roasted meat drifts faintly in the air, and your stomach growls with the subtle rebellion of the undead. You join the line outside the gate. The steward, a man with a nose so long it could detect deceit from 10 paces, sits at a table with parchment and ink. He looks bored, which somehow makes it worse. Name? He asks, not looking up. You tell him. 2 hens, 1 sack of barley, 4 bundles of firewood. His tone is casual, as though listing someone else's belongings. You nod, then add quietly. Had to trade a bit of grain for salt last week. Hope that's forgiven. His eyes flick up, cold and amused. The Lord forgives what he notices. You grit your teeth, unload the offerings, and step aside. Behind you, someone mutters a prayer for patience. Ahead, someone else whispers a curse you're too tired to repeat. When it's done, you walk away lighter in goods, but heavier in spirit. You can't help glancing back at the manor. Its banners fluttering, guards pacing lazily, the faint sound of laughter from within. Nice to know our sacrifices keep them warm. You mutter, joke too, sour but true. On the road home, you pass the church. The priest stands outside, shaking a collection box. For the souls in purgatory, he calls. A few coins for eternal rest? You nearly laugh. Tell them to pay rent in heaven. You say under your breath, and keep walking. Even faith, it seems, has fees. Inside your hut, the fire's burned low. You toss in a few sticks, watching the flames rise reluctantly. Your spouse looks up from sewing, eyebrow raised. Did you give them everything? Everything but my temper. You reply, and they tried for that too. They smile faintly, though it doesn't reach their eyes. At least we still have each other. You nod. It's a thin comfort, but it's the only kind you can afford. Historians still debate how peasants truly felt about their lords, whether loyalty outweighed resentment. Some records speak of faithful service, others of quiet defiance, even riots. But sitting here, staring at the smoke twisting upward, you realize the truth is messier. You don't hate the Lord. Not exactly. You hate the system that lets one man feast while another freezes, yet you know breaking it would mean worse chaos. Survival, once again, trumps fairness. You think back to the festival, the laughter, the warmth of shared struggle. That's where your loyalty lies. Not upward, but sideways. With the people who dig the same dirt, who curse the same cold, who find joy in spite of it all. As night falls, you hear hooves outside. For a moment, your heart jumps. Another collector. But it's just Martin, grinning under his hood, holding a bundle. Traded some old nails and a jug of ale for this, he says, unwrapping the cloth. Inside a small iron pot, dented but sturdy. Thought you could use it. You blink, surprised. You traded Al for metal. Are you ill? He grins wider. It was weak, Al. Barely a sin. Joke 3, good, natured and warm. You clap his shoulder, thank him, and set the pot by the fire. Little things like this, shared tools, quiet favors, are the real taxes of peasant life, the kind that build rather than break. Later, after Martin leaves, you sit by the new pot, watching its dull surface reflect the flames. You think about all the invisible exchanges that keep the village alive. Trust, kindness, shared secrets. You think about how the lords above might own the land, but it's the peasants who own each other's hope. Outside, the wind carries faint music from the manor. Laughter, clinking cups. The careless joy of people who don't wonder where their next loaf comes from. You listen, not bitterly but curiously, as though hearing a story from another planet. You wake to dripping. Not the slow, stealthy leak of the roof in deep winter, but the rhythmic, messy patter of snow giving up the ghost. The frost that once painted every surface has surrendered. Water runs down the walls in thin silver threads. For the first time in months, you can smell earth. It's a strange, heady scent. Rot and rebirth, sweat and promise all mixed together. You step outside, blinking into the brightness. The snow is melting fast, turning the fields into vast mirrors of mud. Every step squelches. Chickens peck at puddles, happy for once. Your donkey, miserable creature that it is, stands ankle, deep in muck and looks offended by the entire season. The thaw has begun. Spring, though, if you can even call this chaos spring, is no gentle friend. It's a loud, wet, back-breaking rebirth. Everything needs fixing. The fences that sagged under snow, the thatch that leaked, the tools that rusted in the cold. All demand attention at once. You grab your spade and join the others in the fields. The ground, finally softening, gives off steam in the morning sun. It's exhausting work, but there's a rhythm to it. Dig, lift, turn, repeat. Mud creeps up your boots, then your shins, then inevitably everywhere. You glance at Martin beside you, both of you coated in filth. We should charge admission, you say, deadpan. Mud baths for nobles. Joke 1 earns a snort and a cough. Historians still argue whether the medieval spring was truly a time of hope or simply another burden in disguise. You can see both sides. Hope, after all, is heavy when you're the one carrying it. By midday, you stop to rest. The sun's higher now, weak but generous. You peel off your cloak, letting the warmth soak through your tunic. Around you, the village hums. Someone's hammering at a plough blade. A child's chasing a goose that refuses to cooperate, and the smell of wet hay drifts on the wind. There's laughter again. Not the desperate kind from midwinter, but the loose, easy kind that happens when the world stops trying to kill you for a moment. A fringe tidbit you remember from the old man, in the next hut floats into your mind. Some villages used to hold a ritual called beating the bounds. Come spring, marching the edges of the land, singing, sometimes literally whipping the ground with branches to wake it up. You picture that. Half ceremony, half group therapy, and chuckle. Maybe the earth does need a good slap after all that hibernation. The afternoon brings its own problems. Melting snow turns roads into rivers. The stream behind your hut swells, swallowing its banks. You and your spouse spend hours stacking stones, praying the water doesn't decide to move in uninvited. If it floods again, you grumble. I'm building a boat and declaring myself a saint. Joke 2, shouted over the rush of water. Despite the mud and exhaustion, something inside you stirs. A lightness you haven't felt since before the frost. You notice buds on the trees, tiny green fists punching through bark. You spot a bird. An actual bird, not a scavenger. Darting through the thawing air. Life is creeping back, reckless and determined. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants marked the changing of seasons consciously, or if life simply flowed without ceremony. But as you stand there, Boots sinking into new mud. You can feel the shift as plainly as breath. Winter's grip is loosening, and everything, from worms to humans, is scrambling to reclaim its place. That night, exhaustion hits like a wall. You eat whatever's left: barley mash, dried peas, and a little salted fish, and collapse near the hearth. Your muscles ache, but it's the good kind of ache, the sort that reminds you of progress. The fire burns bright, and outside, the rain drums a soft, steady rhythm on the roof. You think about how every year repeats this cycle: freeze, thaw, plant, pray, harvest, starve, repeat. Maybe survival isn't a story of triumph, but of persistence, of outlasting the weather, the hunger, even yourself. You close your eyes and imagine the fields weeks from now. Rows of green, buzzing with insects, heavy with the promise of grain. It feels distant, impossible, yet certain. In the middle of the night, thunder wakes you. You jolt upright as rain lashes the walls, louder than before. The stream must have overrun its banks. You rush to the door, pull it open, and watch as water sloshes through the yard. It's not deep yet, but fast. You grab a bucket and start digging small trenches, redirecting the flow. Your spouse joins you, hair plastered. Both of you soaked and shivering but laughing anyway. The water's jealous. They shout, "It wants our house! Tell it to pay rent first!" You yell back. Joke 3. Ridiculous under the rain, but it works. By dawn, the flood recedes. You stand in the doorway, dripping and covered in mud, but alive. The clouds break open, revealing a strip of pale blue sky. The world smells new again, wet, raw, awake. You breathe it in. You think of all the winters you've endured, all the thaws you've welcomed like miracles. You think of the peasants before you and after you, each one bending, digging, rebuilding. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants found joy in their work or simply endured it. You smile to yourself, watching sunlight glint on the puddles. Maybe endurance is its own form of joy. You turn back inside, kick off your muddy boots, and sit by the hearth. The fire sputters, but doesn't die. You add another log, watching the smoke curl upward, mingling with the faint scent of spring. The days stretch longer now, soft and golden around the edges. The mud begins to dry, the air smells faintly of grass and ash. And people start to remember how to smile without irony. The worst of the hunger has passed. The wolves have retreated to the forest's far shadows, and the nights no longer bite so cruelly. You find yourself outside one evening after work, sitting near the communal fire in the village square. The flames crackle lazily, and around it gathers a small crowd. Farmers with sore backs, children too tired to play, but too restless for bed, and a handful of elders who seem carved from smoke and stories. This is the part of the year when tales return. When there's just enough food, just enough peace, for people to let their imaginations breathe again. A grey, bearded man named Osric begins the first story, his voice deep and gravelly, like boots crunching gravel. They say, he begins, and winter's colder than this one. Saint Cuthbert walked the fens barefoot, his feet never freezing, because the fire of faith burned hotter than any hearth. You nod, partly because it's polite and partly because it's comforting. Fire from faith, sure. Wouldn't mind a little of that in January. Historians still argue whether medieval saints' tales were literal truth or carefully crafted propaganda. But in moments like this, you understand the point isn't accuracy, it's warmth. Belief itself is a kind of fire, one that doesn't demand kindling or coin. Osric's story drifts into another, a woman who brewed all, so strong it scared off a devil in disguise. A night turned to stone for laughing at a church bell. A ghostly black dog that followed liars until they confessed. The children's eyes go wide. The adults chuckle knowingly. You lean closer to the flames, letting the heat lick your hands. Someone offers you a mug of thin beer. You accept, sip, and murmur, "If a devil shows up tonight, He'll have to settle for watered isle and questionable company. Joke 1, earning a ripple of laughter. Next, a young woman named Alina takes her turn. Her stories are newer, less pious, more playful. Tales of clever wives and foolish husbands, of fairies trading songs for milk, of forest spirits who steal the socks of the lazy. Once, she says, a man tried to catch a fairy by luring it with honey. But the fairy told him, "You mortals always chase sweetness, yet you forget you are made of salt." The group hums thoughtfully at that. You whisper, "That's deep for someone who lives under a mushroom." Joke 2, quiet but appreciated. The stories wind on. Each voice folds into the next until the night itself seems to be listening. The wind moves gently through the trees, carrying the scent of moss and the faint memory of winter. Above, stars blink like they're eavesdropping. A fringe tidbit slips into the conversation. Someone mentions the willow, the wisp, the ghostly blue flame said to lead travelers into bogs. One man swears he saw it last year, another insists it's just swamp gas, though he doesn't know what gas means. A woman crosses herself, muttering, "Only fools follow blue lights." You raise an eyebrow, good rule in general. Same goes for taverns after midnight. Joke 3, dry as the owl you're nursing. Historians still debate whether such legends came from fear of the dark or the need to explain the unexplainable. Maybe both. Maybe stories are how peasants built light from nothing, small torches against a world too big to understand. The fire pops, sending sparks skyward like little souls escaping. Someone starts humming a tune, low and soft, and soon it becomes a song. The melody weaves through the smoke, half hymn, half lullaby. You hum along, your voice blending with the others, the rhythm of calloused hands, tired hearts, and stubborn hope. When the song fades, Osric leans forward again. "I'll tell one more," he says, eyes gleaming. The story of the woman in the frost. You listen as the fire dims. His voice lowers. They say she comes on nights too quiet, dressed in rags of ice. She walks through the village, not to harm, but to remind. She whispers in your ear the name of everyone who didn't survive the last winter. Then she asks, "Will you remember them when the sun returns?" No one moves. Even the fire pauses. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the air. After a long silence, a child whispers, "What happens if you say no?" Osric stares into the flames. She forgets you next. A murmur passes through the group. Half nervous laughter, half uneasy belief. You stare at the fire until it blurs, thinking about all the names you've never said aloud again. Historians still argue whether such ghost tales were moral lessons or community memory in disguise. Maybe the Frost Woman is just guilt given form. Or maybe, somewhere, there really is something walking between worlds, keeping score. When the embers begin to die, you help scatter them, spreading warmth one last time. The air cools, the sky deepens, and people begin to drift home. You linger a while, watching smoke twist into the stars. The stories echo in your mind. Not just the saints and spirits, but the laughter between them, the comfort of shared imagination. Maybe that's the real survival tool no one writes down, not bread, not blankets, but storytelling itself. You stand, stretch, and turn toward your hut. The night is quiet now, almost too still. Halfway there, you swear you hear a soft whisper behind you. Just your name, carried by the wind. You spin, heart thudding, but there's nothing. Only frost glimmering faintly on the path. You shake your head, smiling to yourself. Nice try. You mutter to the darkness. But I'm not following any blue lights tonight. You wake before dawn one last time. Not because of the cold, but because of habit. The air is soft, dew clinging to the grass, and the world smells like wet clay and new life. Outside, the fields are no longer grey or brown. They're green. You can hardly believe it. Tiny blades of wheat push through the soil, trembling under the morning light. each one a quiet miracle you helped summon. Your hands still ache from the thawing, planting, patching, and hauling. But the ache feels different now, earned, not endured. The frost that used to crawl under your skin has retreated for good. You pull on your cloak, lighter now than it was in winter, and step outside. The birds are back in force, a choir of tiny, chaotic optimism. You start walking through the village. The roofs glisten with dew, smoke drifts from hearths, and everywhere you look, people are in motion, mending fences, sowing seed, herding animals toward open fields. You nod to Martin, who's already complaining about the mud again. Careful, you call. You'll summon another flood with that attitude. Joke one. He waves you off but grins anyway. At the far edge of the fields, children chase one another with wooden sticks, pretending to just. Their laughter carries far across the valley. You stop to watch for a while, realizing that this simple noise, is what you've been missing all winter. Not warmth, not food, not even rest, but sound. The sound of life returning. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants ever had time for joy. You could tell them yes, in moments like this, between frost and famine, when the fields finally breathe again. The days that follow unfold like a slow exhale. You work hard, yes, but the rhythm has changed. You're not fighting nature anymore. You're partnering with it, coaxing it. You turn the soil, plant the seeds, whisper a half prayer under your breath, and trust that the sun will do its part. Sometimes at night, you sit outside the hut and look toward the forest, where the last patches of snow glow faintly under the moon. You remember how it felt months ago, huddled beside the fire, wondering if your toes would survive another week. Now, you stretch your legs, wiggling those same toes, smug in your victory. A fringe tidbit you overheard in the next village drifts, to mind some peasants used to bury a loaf of bread at the edge of the field in spring. Feeding the earth so it would feed them in return. You smile at that. You might try it next year, seems polite. One evening, after a long day of planting, the village gathers again, not for stories this time, but for a small feast. Everyone brings what they can: onions, bread, a bit of cheese, even some salted pork someone's been hiding since December. The air hums with chatter. The owl flows freely, and someone starts a tune on a fiddle missing one string. You sit beside the fire, eating slowly, letting warmth spread through you from the inside out. The laughter rolls around the square like thunder softened by distance. A boy asks you if the frost woman will come back next winter. You look into the flames before answering. She always comes back, you say. But so do we? The boy grins at that, reassured, and goes back to stealing bread when no one's looking. Historians still debate whether resilience was born of faith, fear, or necessity. You think it's all three, but also something else. Maybe it's humor. Maybe it's the way people tell stories around a fire instead of giving up in the dark. Maybe it's stubbornness. Whatever it is, it works. You tilt your head back and stare at the stars, feeling smaller than ever but oddly content. The fire crackles, the owl tastes faintly of wood smoke, and someone nearby snores loudly enough to shake the bench. You can't help but laugh. Joke too, shared with no one in particular. Later, when you finally crawl into bed, the straw feels softer somehow, or maybe you're just too tired to care. You pull the blanket up to your chin, listening to the night sounds. The hum of crickets, the creak of wood cooling, the occasional distant bark of a dog. It's no longer the silence of survival, but the quiet of peace. Before you drift off, you think about everything you've endured this year. The freezing mornings, the hunger, the floods, the stories, the laughter. You picture the coming months, the wheat rising, the harvest, the first loaf of bread baked from your own field. You imagine biting into it, warm, crusty, real. You smile. You've earned every crumb. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants understood their role in history, whether they knew their daily toil built the foundation for generations to come. But if you could speak across time, you'd tell them survival is history. Every breath, every seed, every laugh stolen from winter's teeth, it all matters. As dawn approaches, light seeps through the cracks of the hut, painting gold stripes across the floor. You stir, stretch, and know deep down you'll face winter again, and again after that. But for now, you've survived, and that's enough. Wind down, 300 words, the world outside softens, like a painting left too long in the sun. You feel your breath slow, the pulse in your wrists settling into a steady rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, lazy and half-hearted, as if even dawn doesn't want to rush. You picture the village you've lived through in this story. The smoke curling from chimneys, the fields stretching under a pale sky, the laughter that still echoes faintly by the fire. You can almost smell the hay again, the damp earth, the faint sweetness of thawing air. Let the image linger. Let it fade at its own pace. The peasant's world was hard, yes, but there was beauty hidden in the grit, in the way people leaned on one another, in the warmth of hands sharing bread, in the stubborn belief that even after the darkest cold, life would bloom again. You might feel that in your own life too, that quiet echo of endurance. The simple act of making it through another season, of finding small joys in impossible places. You felt that spark tonight, the one that kept their fires burning through centuries of snow. Breathe in slowly. Hold it. Let it go. The air cools around you, gentle and still. The night hum fades into nothing but the soft whisper of your own calm heartbeat. You've walked through frost and famine, through laughter and fear, through centuries and stories. You've survived every cold night the past could throw at you. Now, rest. The fields are safe, the fire's still warm, and the stars above, those same stars, are watching quietly, just as they always have. Sleep easy, traveler. You've earned your spring.